Okay, I think we're all here that are going to be here. We're going to talk about chapter 4. At the end, before we get out of here, now don't let me forget, I got to get y'all's hypothetical client reports that we had. So I want you to listen to me, but if some of you have forgotten to do that, you better zip one out in the next little bit before we go. I'm going to take them. I'm trying to decide right now in my head whether I want to pass them right on back out today or wait until, let's see, what's the date? 26th. We have somebody who's not going to be back until the 31st. Not that I can't send them a one. So I'll probably will pass those right on back out to people today. But if I do that, you guys cannot lose the one that you get. Okay, that's important. So we're not going to get through this whole chapter today. I don't know who looked at chapter 4. If you did, you'll see that it was pretty lengthy, a lot of information. I'm going to hit the high points, and for those of you that were in the class prior to this, I apologize because the very first part of this is somewhat similar to the type of information we talked about in 372. But we'll get through it and it gets better, I promise. Okay? Let me share my screen here. All right, so this one is all about, now, again, this class is about assessment in therapeutic recreation. And, you know, obviously we talked about how assessment and the API process, assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation, you've got assessment first. However, like we've talked about, assessment happens all throughout the process, not just at the beginning. We're going to self-assess, and we're going to assess whether or not things are going the way that we want them to go all during our process. Now, note that assessment and evaluation are very similar in meaning in a lot of ways. Now, evaluation is just more summative in nature. It does happen at the end. You're saying, this is what we did for the entire time, and this is the final result. So what you're doing along the way that is evaluating how you're doing, that's actually a form of assessment. So this one gets into the therapeutic recreation processes and techniques, which is a lot about what we talked about in 372. Again, see here, we've got some of this stuff that's similar to what we talked about last time. Now, it's talking about following in the footsteps of Rogers and Maslow. And basically, what they're saying is recreation therapy takes a humanistic perspective set forth by Rogers and Maslow. So when we say a humanistic perspective, that means that this is a people's profession and that we need to be building relationships with the human beings that we are working with. You know, a humanistic, all-encompassing perspective. It embraces concepts like taking a holistic view of people, like I said, all-encompassing, holding all people are capable, saying that all people are all capable of growth and change, seeing people as having a tendency towards self-actualization, and taking a strength-based approach. Something easy to fall into a trap in recreation therapy is, you know, we're talking about assessments here. Not only when we are building that rapport and learning from our clients, are we trying to find out what we need to work on. You know, you feel like what we need to do is find their weaknesses and see what we need to build on moving forward. And in a lot of ways, that's true because we do need to know what we can improve in our patients. That being said, we need to find strengths as well. things that they're interested in, things that they already do, things that you can use. We want to address weaknesses by using the strengths that we find during assessment, okay? That's what this strength-based approach is all about. I'm just going to read this since it's in a quote. A strengths-based approach to practice is not new. It's featured prominently in the work of humanistic psychologists such as Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, both of whom focused on the attainment of an individual's full potential through their theories of the fully functioning person. We'll talk a little bit more in just a minute about the fully functioning person and what they're getting to in that. So something that we are recreation therapists. We are not psychologists. However, just like I said in the last class, we are not counselors, but we do a lot of things that are very similar to counseling when we build that rapport with our clients and they feel safe to talk to us. We fill that role in a lot of ways. So we need to realize that recreation therapists are going to use positive psychology. We are not psychologists. However, we can still use positive psychology. Positive psychology may be perceived as an extension of humanistic psychology. This is a lot of big words in this stuff. Overlook that and realize that we are looking at the person as a whole, trying to improve their well-being. Like humanistic psychology, positive psychology takes a strength-based approach. That, again, take that as the main key right now. We're looking to use strength-based approaches where we build off of things that the clients are able to do, that they like to do. Therefore, they're going to see success rather than jumping straight into, okay, this is what's wrong with you, let's fix this. Give them a chance to succeed by using a strength as part of the remedy. Okay, high-level wellness. This was done by Dunn and Ardell. It's like positive psychology. It's influenced by humanistic psychology again. Now, here, high-level wellness centers on the wholeness of the individual, not only calls for an absence of physical illness, so the person is not sick, but it also implies a psychological and environmental wellness. So they're in a good place, literally and mentally. That's what we're looking for here, and that's what I'm talking about, all-encompassing when we're talking about high-level wellness. And they're saying here, we want them to not only not be sick, but we want them to be safe, and we want them to be in a good mindset. So that's what this is all about. Thus, the physical well-being of the total person is joined by mental and social well-being, informing the concept of health under the notion of high-level wellness. So where that plays in is, like I said in the previous class, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They're looking at physical issues that need to be fixed. You know, we've got a torn ACL. We need to strengthen the quad muscles in this leg. We need to work on, rotator cuff strengthening exercises. Someone had a stroke. We need to work on finger dexterity only. They talk about the physical side of things. Recreation therapy is special in that we talk about the entirety of the individual, and we're looking at wellness as a whole. And we deal with the cognitive side, and we deal with happiness, and we deal with trying to reach this, full scale of wellness, because we do touch on emotions, and we do touch on things that aren't just physical ailments. We deal with social anxieties. We deal with, agoraphobia. We deal with all sorts of things that aren't touched on by other therapists. And that's the thing that made me when I got into the field, fall in love with recreation therapy, the fact that we can make people's day better and have them leave us smiling rather than how they came in frowning, because we are addressing that mental side. Go away. Okay. It's influenced by humanistic psychology along with high-level wellness and positive psychology again. So as a recreation therapist, we're going to recognize that helping clients strive toward health promotion is the main goal of recreation therapy. And health promotion is not just improving cardiovascular health or muscular strength or endurance or anything like that. This belief rests on the right of all people to achieve their highest state of well-being or optimal health. And that is all-encompassing again. It's based on a philosophy that encourages clients to endeavor to achieve maximum health rather than just conquering illness. See the difference between those two things, and that's what makes recreation therapy special in that. Recreation therapy is directed not only the provision of treatment and rehabilitation, but also the dynamic process of health promotion. Okay, we talked about health protection and health promotion, so let's define those here. This is a pretty important slide. Health protection is overcoming or coping with an illness, disorder, or a disability. Is motivated by the stabilizing tendency. We want to find stability in life and find a normalcy. Health promotion, that's achieving the highest level of wellness possible. It's motivated by the actualization tendency. So, actualization tendency is more far-reaching, like this is our goal. Stabilization, the stabilizing tendency, is more about, hey, let's get back to normal. Let's get back to baseline. Health promotion is about making you reach for better than what you've had before. That's kind of the difference on those. So, recreation therapists, they're going to assist clients to achieve health protection and health promotion through the recreation therapy process. And we really, what we want to do, we want to use goal-directed interventions, and we have and will talk more about goals and objectives. That's one thing that makes recreation therapy, the fact that we have objectives. We're working towards specific goals with our clients. So it's purposeful, it's goal-directed, and it involves clients and activities that are going to produce recreational and leisure experiences that lead them to experiencing optimal levels of health for them as individuals. For some of the clients, I'm sorry, this is some wordy stuff, so I'm just kind of wading through part of this. It's going to get a lot less jumbled here shortly. For some clients, reaching the optimal level of health might mean restoring health to what was normal for the individual prior to illness. For others, it may mean adaptively coping with chronic conditions. So, getting to the best place that you can get to now, you know, say after a stroke or after a catastrophic car crash, something like that. Post-COVID syndrome, things like that. Sometimes things change and you have a new normal that you're going to be looking at. But you want to, at the very least, get them to the best state that they can be in. And that's part of our job that we provide through the recreation therapy process. Now, for others, it might mean improving health so they enjoy a high level of wellness. Depends on what clientele we're working with. It depends on where we're working. It depends on the goals of our clients and what they're looking to achieve from recreation therapy. It will depend in some part to on what we have available to us to use, what facilities, what equipment, what things that we can use in our toolbox to work with our clients, But to accomplish these ends, recreation therapists employ a systematic 4-step process termed the recreation therapy process. And most of you should be familiar with this process, and we talked about it, so somebody yell it out. API, okay. What's A? What's P? What's P?
Planning.
What's I?
Intervention.
Intervention or implementation. What's E? Evaluation. There you go. Man, y'all got lucky today in the back. Maybe there will be something else coming up. Okay. So, we've talked about this. We need to understand that this is we talk about all these models and all these different frameworks of how recreation therapy can be provided. And it all comes down to me, and the way that I have used it during my years of practicing. Now, I did follow this right here. This is, and this is something, again, for you guys that are looking at occupational therapy, looking at physical therapy, this information we're talking about today is not for naught. Like, it's something you can take with you and use down the road. It may be coined a different term. It may not have the same letters. But if you are trying to get somebody into a state of better wellness than they currently are, you're going to go through these 4 steps. And if you're in my classes, you need to know these 4 steps and what they are. So, assessment obviously needs to come first. That's where we get to know our clients. That's where they get to know us. Something that we haven't talked about much, but it's important with assessment, is we need to form a rapport with them. If you want your clients to open up to you, clients, patients, I just use clients because that's what we always call them. If you want them to really open up to you and give you honest answers on any sort of assessments that you're doing, they need to feel comfortable with you. They need to trust you. You don't need to just say, all right, nice to meet you. Have a seat right there. All right, and just start asking questions. You need to kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, you got to schmooze them up a little bit and say, hey, how you doing? So I hear you like to do this. You're going to have a little something that you can go from up front. Build that rapport with them, and then you will have better assessments when you do them, because they're going to feel more open to talking to you and telling you things. Then quickly, because it's not the key of this class, once you've done your assessment, not only have you assessed what their needs are, you've assessed what your strengths are, what their strengths are, which we just talked about, and all this stuff is strength-based. You are going to work on their needs, work on their deficits by showcasing their strengths. If they're strong mentally and not very strong in certain functional ways, then you're going to have them think their way through getting better. You're going to how to do things, get them to brainstorm how they can do things differently, independently, or with as least assistance as possible, so they're playing a role in their treatment. So you found needs, you found weaknesses, you built that rapport. Then you're going to make a plan. After seeing what we have, this is what we need to do. You put it together in an IPP, individualized program plan. Note the word individualized, very important. It's not going to be, everyone's is going to be different. It's individualized for each person. Once you've got a plan together, then you implement it, which is, you tell them up front during the planning phase, and you get that together and you say, all right, this is what we're going to do for the next 3 months. We're going to work on this. We're going to try to improve this. And then when you look at it, then you implement it. At the end of that, then you're going to evaluate and see whether or not it was effective, whether it was not, whether what you gave them to work on was too easy, whether it was too hard. Those are the type things that you find out in evaluation. You know, you look at the numbers. When they're during the implementation process, you need to be able, with the goals and objectives that you're going to make, and we'll talk about goals and objectives also. The objectives need to be things that you can look at and say, they did that or they did not do that. I mean, literally, you can put a check mark by it. Check, check, check. Did they get there? Did they do it? Or how many times out of 10 were they successful? If they were successful 9 out of 10 times, the next, at the end, during the evaluation process, you probably want to step it up just a little bit and challenge them further if they're going to be with you for longer. So that's kind of the purpose of the whole evaluation process of that. So here's why the recreation therapy or the API process we talked about is important. It gives you a problem-solving structure to accomplish delivery of effective, customized care. It leads you to program individually. If you follow those steps and you do individualized assessments, plans, now, not to say that every activity is going to be individualized. You're going to do some group activities, but they just need to be beneficial in some way that your clients are going to find benefit. Involves orderly, step-by-step actions directed to achieve stated goals. Promotes customized care by providing a system to meet specific, unique client needs. Tailors interventions directly to the individual, not to the disease or disability. Again, we've talked about how you can't have cookie cutter plans for everyone with quadriplegia. Is not going to have, you know, here's your recreation therapy plan. Every person you deal with that may have Down syndrome, they're not going to get the Down syndrome TR manual and go with it. It's going to be different for each person. So that's why it's tailored to the individual, not to the disease or the disability or the deficit. Also, the recreation therapy process, it increases client participation in their own care by collaboration between the client and the rec therapist during each phase of the recreation therapy process. You're going to be communicating with your patients all the way through. Something important that I have seen, I know this to be factual, the more the client is involved and engaged in the process all the way through, the more effective you're going to be in the end, the more they are going to buy into what you're selling, because you're giving them choices. You're giving them a chance to tell you how they feel. You're giving them a chance to help tweak what they're doing. Very important. That part is key, because that collaboration can make or break success in a lot of cases, depending on the clients you're working with. If they don't feel like they've had their say in what you're doing, they're not doing it. You know, they're like, you're not going to tell me what to do. If you talk to them and you kind of finesse them into thinking it's their idea, and I'm not saying we need to be sneaky, but I'm just saying if you talk to them and come to an agreement with them that you kind of lead them to, because you know that's what they need to work on, they're going to buy in, they're going to do it. Some more reasons why it's important. It offers an efficient, systematic approach where the focus is always on the client. Okay, it's not on us. It's not on the facility. It's not on how much you can bill for certain services. It's not on how much the facility can make off of certain interventions. It's all about the client. If you follow this API process, it keeps the focus on the client. Very important. It allows delivery of care that's organized, continuous, and systematic. Leads to a goal-directed approach and outcomes that can be reached through recreation therapy interventions. We all know that. And it ensures accountability by including the evaluation of sought outcomes. That's the E. Evaluation at the end. When you finish what you're doing, you have to say, this was successful, this was not successful. Our plan from here is to do this, either back off or make it harder, one or the other. But you're going to have that built-in accountability if you're following this recreation therapy process. It's cyclical or cyclical in nature. It establishes interrelationships among and between its phases, which ensures all of its parts work together. So that kind of plays into what I was talking about, how you're constantly assessing whether or not what you're doing is working. I mean, if you write an IPP for someone, individualized program plan based on your assessment, and they do 2 or 3 sessions with you, and it is clearly apparent that your goals that you have set for them are unattainable. Are you stuck having to do that for the entire time? Absolutely not. Now, you may have to go through some hoops to change your IPP, but it's your duty to assess. You don't want to waste, if it's a 3-month period, you're not going to waste 3 months of their life and your life doing things that they can't do. Just the same as you don't want to make things so, if you do 3 sessions with them and it's just like, hey, can I pick up this pen? Yep. I need something harder. So you can also change IPPs. That's what it's talking about, how there's the entire time you're assessing while you're implementing. Your assessment and planning come together. So there's interrelationships in all the phases of API, and that's important. It provides systematic and logical sequence through which recreation therapists can apply knowledge, skills, and critical thinking to deliver quality care. That says enough. It can be universally applied as a framework in all settings in which recreation therapy transpires. That's another good thing about it, because there's a lot of different places where you can work in recreation therapy. Somebody throw some locations out. Where can we work? Hospitals. Rehab centers. VA. Nursing home. Huge need in the nursing home sector right now. We've got more elderly people than we've ever had. There's lots and lots of potential in that setting. Schools, hospitals, correctional facilities. API works in all of them. API works for physical therapy. You still have to do the same thing. You have to assess what's going on with the patient when you meet them. Then you have to come up with a plan. Right, Kelly? You're going PT. Once you have a plan of what specific exercises you're going to do, if you're going to do ultrasound, stem machine, implement it, then you're going to look and see how it worked out. It fits. It fits anything where we're trying to help an individual improve their life. API is going to be there. So, as I said, regardless of where you end up, this is not something that's useless for you, okay? It offers a means to interpret to others how recreation therapy contributes to client care. Basically, it gives us an easy, when we're sitting in a team meeting and we're sitting around a table with a bunch of other professionals, occupational therapists and nurses and doctors and dietitians and psychologists and all social workers and all these people. And we're talking about providing care to our patients. We can tell them at what stage of the game of the API process we're at with an individual. It gives us a nice framework that's easily understood, where we can explain what we're doing with our patients. That's the way that I'm reading into that. And it's something that they can understand because they're trying to help the patients as well. And they're going through a very similar process, although they probably don't use API, as their acronym to remember it. All right. This talks about assessment. And so that's why we're here. That's what this class is all about. It's the first phase in the recreation therapy process, provides the basis for meaningful recreation therapy interventions. Without proper assessment, without comprehensive assessment to give us enough information to base what we're going to be doing off of, then we're not doing it properly. It's the basis for meaningful recreation therapy interventions. You have to have good assessments. So these are the areas, and this is something that I really like, and I talked about how this sets us apart from other therapies and what makes recreation therapy kind of special. These are the areas of assessment that we can look at, identified by the NCTRC. What's NCTRC? National Council for Therapeutic Recreation Certification. If you want to get certified as a therapeutic recreation specialist, that's who oversees it. So they know lots of stuff. They smarter than I is at NCTRC. Sensory, we can assess sensory. We have, depending on where you work, who you're working with. When I was at NMRC working with developmental disabilities, a lot of sensory issues. We had clients with autism. We had clients that had issues with hearing and sight that had nothing to do with, anything else other than just that. Cognitive, the same. We had a lot of issues with cognitive there. We needed to see where they were on the cognitive spectrum, where we would know how to program for them. So that assessment was very important to know, are they going to be able to follow instructions, simple instructions? Are they going to need hand-on-hand, hand-over-hand assistance to play bingo, let's say? Are they cognitively able to find, I-7? I don't even remember a bingo board. I don't know if that would be the proper one. Social, how do they socially interact? You can see that just by watching a lot of times. And assessments sometimes don't have to be sit down, I'm going to drill you, give you a bunch of questions, or have you fill out this form. Sometimes assessments are done using these guys right here when you're watching them in their natural environment or with their peers. Physical, that's another thing that's going to stick out a lot of times that you will see right off the bat. If someone is on a walker or in a wheelchair, or clearly has one leg that's shorter than the other, a lot of these things are going to be apparent. Now, there's some other physical things that are going to be assessed, like you're talking about endurance. You may need to do that. If you wanted to test flexibility, body fat, things like that, you can also test those things as well, especially if we're trying to improve those specific things in our clients. Affective, I think we talked about this before. What are we looking at if we're identifying and assessing someone's affect.
Their mood.
Yep. Basically their mood. You know, if someone has a flat affect, they're just looking at you like, no matter what you do. I mean, you can get right up in their face and they're just going to look at you just flat. If they have that, you're going to have a different challenge in front of you to be able to tell whether or not they're enjoying what you're doing. You know, you may have to look at other cues. So we can assess sensory, cognitive, social, physical, affective, leisure, where, now this is one where we ask them, what do you like to do? What sort of leisure activities have you done in the past? What are some leisure activities you would like to do in the future? What are some things that you absolutely would not want to do? You know, and I always bring up water for that one. I had clients that had, you know, some accidents around water, and they didn't want to do anything that had to do with water. They didn't want to go to a cookout at the lake because there was a lake there. Even though we weren't going to use the lake, they didn't want to be around that water. You know, so those sort of things that you have to learn up front. And then functional skills, you know, are they able to get into a van to go somewhere independently? Are they able to go to the restroom and complete that whole process independently? I mean, depending on the group you're working with, are they able to tie their own shoes? Simple things to us, not so simple to some of the people that we may be working with. So we can also assess functional skills. So gathering assessment data. First, you're going to try to gather that as described by the NCTRC. It's going to be in those areas that we talked about. Then once you have assessment data, you're going to use it in clinical reasoning. So from what you've learned from the fact that you're keeping up with the trends and topics in the field, and you've looked at things that have worked for people in this population before, you're going to take what you found in the assessment and use this clinical reasoning, somewhat common sense of your own that you've learned, and come up with a recreation therapy diagnosis / needs list / strength list as well. So clinical reasoning, since it was on the last slide, it's used by practitioners to collect and evaluate data and make judgments about the diagnosis and management of patient problems. A complex cognitive process that uses formal and informal thinking strategies to gather and analyze patient information, evaluate the significance of this information, and weigh alternative actions. So you take what you've learned in the assessment and you make judgments about from what you've learned, from what you've seen, from what you know to be good, best practice for this situation. And that's that's clinical reasoning. You take that, put it together, and help you come up with a plan. It says in the bottom portion here that you gather and analyze patient information. So there's a gathering portion. That's the assessment, really. And then to me, when you get into the analyzing portion, you're kind of getting into the planning phase of API. You're putting, okay, so this is what I have. This is what we need to address. How are we going to do it? So you're moving into planning, and that's why it said earlier on that slide that it's kind of always intermingled. All of the four parts are all working together in API, and that's what makes it work. And it says, evaluate significance of the information and weigh alternative actions. So you don't want to say, okay, we've got this going on. This is what we're going to do. You need to really think on it and think about what are 2 or 3 choices that we could do here. Okay. What's the best case scenario? Which one do I think is going to work the best? Which one do I think they're going to enjoy the most? Which one should I throw out because it may be a little bit dangerous? Which ones, you're going to weigh the pluses and minuses and let that play a role in how you're going to move as you go into the planning portion. So, again, clinical reasoning a little bit more. Once you get the assessment data, you scrutinize the data during clinical reasoning. We talked about that just now. Clinical critical thinking. You develop understanding the forces related to the client's clinical situation as a basic for clinical interventions. That plays into, again, them making this independent. You're looking at them, you're making sure that you're using their specific clinical situation for the basis of what you're going to give them for activities moving forward. This shows you the importance of getting the assessment information that you really need. You need good, strong assessment information to be able to do this clinical reasoning and make a plan. So clinical reasoning produces a recreation therapy diagnosis. A recreation therapy diagnosis derives knowledge or information about what's causing the difficulty or interfering with the client's desires, and it determines the client's needs. So you find out what you're going to be working on, what you need to be planning for to address. Yes, we want to use strengths to overcome these weaknesses or deficits that we're going to be programming for. But you are right here. The diagnosis is where we find out what we have to address. Let me see where we were. All right. I'm going to skip this one because I don't want to go into the chapter because I didn't bring my book. Okay, this is important. Major methods of client assessments. There's several. Observing, like I said, that's one that we can do. If I see you come in on crutches, that tells me something and you haven't had to say a word to me. Now, I might need clarification on what's going on and let me know whether this is going to be short-term, long-term, etc. If I see you with an eye patch on, it's pretty safe for me to say that you're not going to be able to see out of the eye that has the eye patch on for now. I mean, if I see y'all come into the room and we don't have COVID seating guidelines and everybody piles in right down here in the front, and then one person sits in that back corner over there, that tells me something. That's nobody has said a word. That's just observation. You watch people in a group. Do they go up and talk to people? Are they interacting, or are they standing off by themselves? A lot of those things you're going to be able to just observe. Then there's also interviewing, and that is, it sounds so formal. It doesn't need to be, and it should not be, especially if you want to build that rapport or relationship that I've talked about with our clients that is so important. You can't just jump in and start giving them a hardcore, straight from a script interview. You need to talk to them about how they're doing, where they're from, what they like to do, and then you can get into, all right, now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit, let me find out some more where we can make this the best situation for you while you're here with us, okay? What sort of things are you interested in? Then you can start moving into your assessment interview once you have broken the ice. You don't just jump straight into that. That's something to remember, because people aren't going to You're not going to build that rapport without that friendly portion up front. You don't just jump straight into it. Even at job interviews, good job interviews, they're done that way too. They're going to greet you with some niceties up front. They're just not going to sit you down and start throwing the book at you. You know, it's just common sense and common courtesy. Some different observational methods here when you're assessing clients. Casual observation, where you're just watching just in general to see what's going on. Skilled observation, you're looking for specific things in a skilled observation. You're probably going to be taking some notes. Now, do you want to be following the client around with a clipboard? Are they going to act natural if you're doing that? Probably not. I wouldn't. I would be constantly looking back at whoever had the clipboard. So, naturalistic observation, that's just observing them in an unscripted moment doing what they want to do. Now, specific goal observation, you are looking to see if they are able to do this or that. You know, are they able to walk upstairs on their own? Or how well do they get upstairs? Standardized observation, you're comparing how they're doing in comparison to the standard. You know, yes, they can get upstairs, but it took them 5 minutes to get up 10 stairs. So you're comparing according, you know, you're looking at them in comparison to the standard for a specific activity or whatever you're looking at that point. So there's two types of standardized observations. Standardized instruments, and these we are going to get into. I'll go ahead and let you know. We're going to probably do these in class. The leisure diagnostic battery. I brought in that big, thick red book the other day. It has all kind of good recreation therapy. Julie came and borrowed it from me the other day. It's a treasure trove of recreation therapy. It tells you how to do them. It tells you how to read the scores, all of that good stuff. Leisure diagnostic battery, the CERT cert, comprehensive evaluation of recreation therapy scale. These are both very good standardized instruments. It's kind of, you know, you're talking about standardized instruments here. You're looking at, you know, what do you think of like standardized tests? ACT, GRE, some of these are like standardized assessments as well. We're not going to be giving those as a recreation therapist, but these are standardized, pre-written, pre-scaled assessments that we'll look at more in depth soon, actually. Time interval observations. If someone, let's say in my time at the NMRC, we had people who, this was done a lot by psychology, where they did frequency counts of specific behaviors. They wanted to see how many times a client tried to leave their assigned area per hour, or how many times if they're trying to break someone from doing self-stimming behavior, which is, you know, may just be like for me and you, that's not, but if it's disruptive for their life, we might want to try to break that, okay? That would be an example. They would sit there, and they would get frequency counts of a specific behavior for a given amount of time. So that's the time interval observation, what you're looking at there. Almost done for today. Very, 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 very important right here. Standardized assessment instruments need to be valid and reliable. And I need somebody smart to tell me if something is valid, what does that mean?
Measuring what you want to measure.
Y'all hit it. Yes, it is measuring what you want it to measure. Understand what I'm saying with that? If it's valid, your tool, your assessment instrument, you're actually measuring what it's supposed to be measuring. Okay, if it's reliable, what can we assume from that? Somebody said something. Consistent. If Julie used the assessment and gave it to Tia, and she made a score of 14, and if Kelly gave it to Tia, what score should she make? If it's reliable, there shouldn't be a large amount of difference between the person who's giving the assessment. Okay, so we know reliable, valid, it's measuring what it's supposed to measure. Reliable, it's going to give credible results kind of across the board if people are implementing it properly. If you're following the way that you're supposed to do the assessment, you should get a score that's very close to, if different people are giving the test, you should all come up with close results. And here's one right here, and this is the last one for today. So now that we talked through it, we'll read exactly what it says here. Validity, it answers the question of whether the instrument assesses what it's supposed to assess, or does it test what it sets out to test? It's basically exactly what we said. Reliability answers the question of whether or not the instrument produces consistent results. Does it yield reproducible results? So I can assure you that the leisure diagnostic battery and the comprehensive evaluation of recreation therapy scale that we talked about and we will be looking at, they have been around for a long time. They are both valid and reliable because they have been proven to be so for a long time. Okay. We still have a lot of chapter 4 left, and I think that was plenty for today. We're going to move on into chapter 4 next time. And something else that I think I will email you guys. Oh, no. Y'all are going to let me forget. Let me get those hypothetical things, your hypothetical client cases. I will bring them next class, okay? I'll bring them Thursday. No, you don't. Yeah, you don't have to put your name on it. It's on there, no big deal. Got yours already. All right, I take it back. I'll hand them out today because it's 5 o'clock. I'm ready to go, and I know you are too. I will. I'm gonna look these over between now and Thursday. Make sure that I don't want to make triangle tweaks on any of them, and then we'll just hand them out at random. And then we'll come up with a plan for when the next. We'll finish chapter 4. We'll hand these out. If there's anything else that I need you to know in advance, I'll let you guys know. Okay. And I'm going to go back and watch some more Brady Bunch between now and next time. That explains the pants. I'm sorry. I saw it. Huh? Yeah. It was a cooking show, and they had to make a cake of Mike Brady. And it's actually kind of funny because his butt fell off at the end. It made it comical, but see you guys Thursday.
Okay, I have a question.
What up, girlie?
So I know that I already asked you to write me one letter of recommendation, but I am applying to some more schools because options. And so I was wondering if you could do something.
Send me what you need.
I will. Okay. It's like,
I got you, girl.
thank you. Thank you. It's like, I think I'm on 4 schools. Okay. So.
I should be able to more or less.
Yeah.
We'll make it work.
Thank
Hey,
you
did
so
you
much.
write about John, a 62-year-old?
No, I read about Francine.
Okay, I've got Francine here. I was making sure that Francine, you were in the back. Okay.
Yep.
I was going to say, I know I put your thing in this folder, but that's why I brought it.
Yeah, I printed it out an extra time just in case people were like, we got my name. I was really worried about that. And it was funny because Bill was sitting there and he was like,